coordinates amounted to that. In the light of dawn, for we had been all night at the Meteor pit and silver was coming in the east, he looked at me with fierce resolve in his eyes. "Hammond, that gives us over 12 hours to get to Virginia." You mean to go? But just 12 hours? That's better than the transcontinental record, to say nothing of the time it would take to find a little rock in the Pacific." "We have the Golden Gull. She's as fast as any ship we've ever flown." "But we can't take the Gull. Those alterations haven't been made. And that new engine. A Bearcat for power, but it may go dead any second. The Gull can fly, but she isn't safe." "Safety be damned. I've got to get to Virginia and get there in the next 12 hours." "The Gull will fly, but—" "All right. Please help me get off." "Help you off? It's a fool thing to do, but if you go, I do." "Thanks, Hammond, awfully." He gripped my hand. "We've got to make it." With a last glance into the gaping pit from which we had dug the marvelous stone, we turned and ran across to the hangars. As we ran, the sun came above the sea in the east. Its first rays struck us like a fiery lance. The mechanics had not yet appeared. Charlie pushed the doors back, and we ran out the trim little Golden Gull, beautiful in her slender wing and her graceful tapering lines. I seized the starting crank, and Charlie sprang into the cockpit. I cranked until the mechanism was droning dismally, and pulled the lever that engaged it with the engine. I had been in too much haste to get up the proper speed, and the powerful new engine failed to fire. Charlie almost cried with vexation while I was cranking again. This time the motor coughed and fell into a steady, vibrant roar. With the wind from the propeller screaming about me, I disengaged the crank and stood waiting while the motor warmed. Charlie gave it scant time to do so before he motioned me to kick out the blocks. I tumbled into the enclosed cockpit beside him. He gave the ship the gun, and we roared across the field. In 5 minutes we were flying west at a speed just under 300 miles per hour. Charlie was crouched over the stick, scanning the instrument board, and flying the Gull almost at her top speed. Again and again his eyes went to the little clock on the panel. 12 hours and 40 minutes, he said, and an hour gone already. We've got to be there by 5 minutes after 6. We were flying over Louisiana when the oil line clogged. The engine heated dangerously. Reluctantly, Charlie cut off the ignition and fell in a swift spiral to an open field. "We've got to fix it," he said. "Another hour gone, and we need every minute." "This new engine. It's powerful enough, but we should have had time to overhaul it and make those changes." Charlie landed with his usual skill, and we fell to work in desperate haste. A grizzled farmer, a wad of tobacco in his cheek, and 3 ragged urchins at his heels stopped to watch us. He had just been to his mailbox and had a morning paper in his hand. Charlie questioned him about the storm. "Storm center nears the American coast," he read in a nasal drawl. "Greatest storm of year drives shipping upon west coast. 6 vessels reported lost. SS Valhalla disabled. Sends SOS. 1,000 lives are the estimated toll tonight of the most terrific storm of the year, which is sweeping toward the Pacific coast, driving all shipping before it. Radiograms from the Valhalla at 5 p.m. report that she is disabled and in danger. It is doubtful that rescue vessels can reach her through the storm." We got the engine repaired and took off again. Charlie looked at the little clock. 5 minutes to 10. 8 hours and 10 minutes left, and we've got a darn long ways to go. We had to stop at San Antonio, Texas, to replenish gasoline and oil. 10 minutes lost, Charlie complained as we took off. And that monster, waiting in the future to drag Virginia to a hideous death. 2 hours later, the plane developed trouble in the ignition system. The motor was new, with several radical changes that we had introduced to increase power and lessen weight. As I had objected to Charlie, we had not done enough experimental work on it to perfect it. We limped into the field at El Paso and spent another priceless half hour at work. I got some sandwiches at a luncheon counter beside the field and listened a moment to a radio loudspeaker there. "Many thousands are dead," came the crisp, metallic voice of the announcer, "as a result of the storm now raging on the Pacific coast, the worst in several years. The storm center is spending its force on the coastal regions today. Millions of dollars in damage are reported in cities from San Francisco to Manzanillo, Mexico. The greatest disaster of the storm is the loss of the passenger liner Valhalla of the Red Star Line. It is believed to have collided with the abandoned hulk of an Italian-owned tramp freighter, the Roma, which was left by its crew yesterday in a sinking condition. Radiograms from the liner ceased 3 hours ago, when she was said to be sinking. The officers doubted that her boats could be launched in such a sea. I waited to hear no more. Charlie checked our route while we were stopped, and we took off. We crossed the Rio Grande and flew across the rocky, brush-scattered hills of Mexico in a direct line for the rock in the sea. "If anything happens so we have to land again, well, it's just too bad," Charlie said grimly. "But we've got to go this way. It's something over 600 miles in a straight line. 15 minutes to 4 now. We have to average nearly 300 miles an hour to get there." He was silent and intent over his maps and instruments as we flew on over the lofty Sierra Madre range, and over a long slope down to the Gulf of California. Headwinds beset us as we were over the stretch of blue water, and we flew on into a storm. "We had hardly time to make it without the wind against us," Charlie said. "If it holds us back many miles, well, it just mustn't." Purple lightning flickered ominously in the mass of blue storm clouds that hung above the mountainous peninsula of Lower California. I had a qualm about flying into it in our untested machine, but Charlie leaned tensely forward and sent the Golden Gull on at the limit of her speed. Gray vapor swirled about us, rent with livid streaks of lightning. Thunder crashed and rumbled above the roar of our racing engine. Wild winds screeched in the struts, rain and hail beat against us. The plane rose and fell. She was swirled about like a falling leaf. The stick struggled in Charlie's hands like a living thing. With lips tightened to a thin line, he fought silently, fiercely, desperately. Suddenly we were sucked down until I had an uneasy feeling at the pit of my stomach. I saw the grim outline of a bare mountain peak dangerously close below us, shrouded in wind-whipped mist. In sudden alarm I shouted, "We'd better get out of this, Charlie. We can't live in it long." In the roar of the storm he did not hear me, and I shouted again. He turned to face me after a glance at the clock. "We've less than an hour, Hammond. We've got to go on." I sank back in my seat. The plane rolled and tossed until I thanked my lucky stars for the safety strap. In nervous anxiety I watched Charlie bring the ship up again and fight his way on through the storm. For an eternity it seemed we battled through a chaos of wind-driven mist, bright with purple lightning and shaken with crashing thunder. Charlie struggled with the controls until he was dripping with perspiration. He must have been utterly worn out after 36 hours of exhausting effort. A dozen times I despaired of life. The compass had gone to spinning crazily. We dived through the rain until we could pick up landmarks below. 3 times a great bare peak loomed suddenly up ahead of us, and Charlie averted collision only by zooming suddenly upward. Then slate gray water was beneath us, running in white-crested mountains. I knew that we were at last out over the Pacific. "We've passed Point Eugenia," Charlie said. "It can't be far now. But we have only 15 minutes left. 15 minutes to get to her, before the attraction of the meteor jerks her away, perhaps to a horrible fate." We flew low and fast over the racing waves. Charlie looked over his charts and made a swift calculation. He changed our course a bit, and we flew on at top speed. We scanned the vast mad expanse of sea below the blue-gray clouds. Here and there were lines of white breakers, but nowhere did we see a rock with a girl upon it. Presently the green outline of an island appeared out of the wild water on our right. "That's Del Tiburon," Charlie said. "We missed the rock." He swung the plane about, and we flew south over the hastening waves. I looked at the little clock. It showed 2 minutes to 6. I turned to Charlie. 7 minutes, he whispered grimly. On and on we flew in a wide circle. The motor roared loud. An endless expanse of racing waves unreeled below us. The little hand crawled around the dial. 1 minute past 6. Only 4 minutes to go. We saw a speck of white foam on the mad gray water. It was miles away, almost on the horizon. We plunged toward it, motor bellowing loud. 5 miles a minute we flew. The white fleck became a black rock smothered in snowy foam. On we swept, and over the rock with bullet light.